Welcome in again, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the R&D Sports Report. My name is Dishmond, and I am excited for today's episode. A little bit later on in the episode, Aaron Torres will be joining me. We talk a lot about college basketball. We talk about the opening at UCLA. We talk about Aaron's picks preseason. We talk about what he's thought so far. Really good conversation. Really enjoyed the conversation that we had. I think you all will really enjoy this one. But up first, I want to talk with you all about a few different things. First off, I don't know how we can't start this episode without talking about the national championship game that occurred Monday night. As I record this, it is Thursday night the 10th. This occurred Monday night between Alabama and Clemson. And not going to spend a whole lot of time here. But at the same time, it's something I think worth talking about. We saw the superiority, really, that Clemson's defense, for the most part, was able to have early on, starting out quick pick six on Tua, and kind of skipping ahead toward the end. What I really saw is the excitement that would happen in the coming years. You talk about Tua's back for at least one more year, that being his true sophomore year. And you have Trevor Lawrence back for Clemson for 2 more years. So both of those teams, obviously, we realize aren't going anywhere. I think Alabama will be back with a vengeance. Probably going to leave a taste in Nick Saban's mouth that he won't enjoy. But at the same time, I think it is a lot to point out the differences kind of between these two teams. We see at Clemson, we've seen a lot of continuity between the coaching staff. We've seen a lot of turnover at Alabama. We've seen Clemson, it just appears to be a somewhat more of a relaxed environment. And I think that some of the athletes, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a little bit more of a relaxed environment, where Bama gives you that. It seems like it's just constantly just go, 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 go. And maybe not a lot of fun compared to what Clemson looks. I mean, if you just look at the difference in coaches and how they act and their mannerisms, you see Dabo Swinney running around a lot and pumping his fist and doing stuff like that, having fun and enjoying it. Then you have Nick Saban, who is very stoic at times and just kind of stares there at you. You see the emotion when he gets angry, but at other times you don't see a lot of emotion coming from Nick Saban sometimes. So I think that's a difference. They talked about on the broadcast of the national championship game. They mentioned Ross, I believe was his name, the standout kid for Clemson that had a heck of a game at wide receiver. And he had an offer. He could have gone to Alabama, but chose Clemson. And one of the things was that continuity. He kind of felt that he knew what he was going to get. You look at Alabama, now having to go out and they need to replace another offensive coordinator as theirs is moving on to Maryland. And, part of that is the success that they've had. Part of it is that they are under that Nick Saban tree, if you will. They have spent time with Nick Saban, so they are highly sought after assistants a lot of times. But I have to think some of it also is probably a little bit of an escape, a little bit of a getaway, to maybe try to get away from the stresses that Nick Saban may cause. He seems to be a little bit more of a demanding head coach, and that primarily comes from he knows exactly what he wants. But going forward, I don't think this is really, we've seen a lot of talk about the dynasty in Bama is dead, and I just don't see how that could possibly happen. I don't see that happening at all. And obviously we see a dynasty being built with Clemson. We see that they are having a lot of success there. And we see that it's winning in a different way. Now, for Clemson, maybe a little bit easier to get back to this same area next year. Not necessarily being that the ACC is super weak or anything like that. But when you look at it, I believe I saw the SEC in the final standings had 7 out of 14 teams, so half of their league finishing in the top 25. Now, that's not to say they play everybody, obviously, in their league. But when you go through the West, then it's a little bit harder in the SEC there. To go through an LSU and Auburn, who are both really good, and probably if you stuck them in another conference would really have success, but when you compare them to Alabama, it looks like they're having no success at all. And a lot of times that's what those coaches get fired for there. But when you're talking about it, obviously if you're saying who has the easier road to get back, I think that is Clemson. They have the easier task to me of getting back next year. You have Trevor Lawrence, which I was really impressed with the way he played. I didn't think that a true freshman quarterback not only could have that success on Nick Saban, but also seemed to be unfazed by that spotlight. He just commanded the spotlight there and seemed to really take the game over. And the thing that I think we didn't see a whole lot of is that he didn't show a lot of the game his athleticism. And I'm excited to see how he grows as a football player and how much better he can get for being this good already as a true freshman. It's not to say that he doesn't have room to improve. He obviously does, but most players will tell you that they always do. But as I said, not a whole lot to really go over. You've probably heard a lot of it, so I don't want to go over the game in and out, break it down each quarter. That's kind of somewhat of my overall thoughts. It wasn't the close game like I thought it might be. I thought it might come down to that final drive, and if you listen to this, you heard that I thought it would come down to maybe that final drive. But from that opening pick six that Tua threw, I thought, this could get ugly. Alabama battles back, and it was a close first, second quarter, and was looking like it was going to be a knockdown, drag-out fight, and then all of a sudden Clemson just opened it up and didn't become much of a game. So, to have Clemson win it now, 2 out of the last 4 years, gives people some break when they say, I don't want to see Bama. I don't want to see Bama over and over and over again. But at the same time, I think that's what we live with in this kind of setup, and I don't think that we needed a playoff expansion. I like it at the 4. Plus, I don't think that networks really want to continue to expand it. Then it just seems to get a little too convoluted and a little too much. But, close game at first. It got away from Alabama. don't really want to continue going too much about that. But, what I will say is it seems to be that Dabo Swinney may have the upper hand here on Nick Saban. When he goes, into recruiting houses, he can talk about these wins over Nick Saban. But at the same time, I think a lot of it does have to do with that continuity, being able to get those kids there. And I think, you see it when he interviews. Dabo seems to have this amazing personality that they relate to. You go to Alabama, you go there to win. You go there to get to the NFL. But it'll be interesting to see where these two teams end up, or if some other team next year is the surprise entrant into the national championship game. But moving on there, I want to shift over now to the professional side there of football and take a little bit of a look here at the NFL playoffs. And all I can say is that I called it right on the AFC side. I said that the Chargers would win. For the Chargers, it was a little tough for the Ravens. Excuse me. And the fact that as your fifth seed, you get a 13-4 team who, they were right behind the Chiefs there, but as it breaks down for that round, they didn't win their division because of the Chiefs, so then they get slotted into the fifth seed. And they have a task there with the Patriots. The Colts beat the Texans. I said they were going to win. Now they get the Chiefs. They are 4-0 all-time against the Chiefs in the playoffs. I don't know if that'll hold true. The NFC side, I didn't do too well. Obviously, we all probably know about the missed field goal for the Bears, for the Eagles to win. But we'll just call that the Nick Foles effect. The Eagles keep winning. And what do you do if you are Philadelphia, if Nick Foles continues to win for you? Do you keep Nick Foles, or do you say Carson Wentz is our guy, but he's been injured? And, the Cowboys were able to beat the Seahawks. I believe in that one. I called for the Seahawks. So I got at least half the games right, which isn't too bad, all things considered. But looking ahead to this weekend, Chiefs-Colts, high-powered offense for the Chiefs. And Aaron talks about this a little bit later on, and you can hear it. Are the Colts able to keep up scoring with the Chiefs? That's, I think, the major thing. You look at their losses, they were high-scoring games. Can the Colts score enough, or can they stop the Chiefs? I don't know that they can stop the Chiefs. Andy Reid's had time off to plan. The Chiefs have had time off to get a little healthier. I don't know that you can say, hey, we can keep up with the score. But one heck of a ride already for the Colts to be able to, get to this point after last year with Andrew Luck coming back. This year, to be able to get to the divisional round, to beat the Texans, and to make this far. But in that game, I would say that the Chiefs win. I think the scoring is too much for the Colts. We look at the Chargers-Patriots. Man, I tell you what, that Chargers defense last week, seeing Lamar Jackson for the second time, seemed to really have the beat on what to do. But honestly, in this way, you almost can't bet against the Patriots. And I just don't know if the Chargers have enough to get it done. I see this one maybe being a field goal game, but I will give the edge here to the Patriots. So that would set up for the AFC Championship, Chiefs-Patriots. It's a little chalky, but I think that's probably how it'll break down. Switching over to the NFC side, we first see another 1-6 matchup here with the Saints and the Eagles. And looking at this one, if the Eagles pull this victory out, I don't know how you can't start to wonder if you're a Philadelphia fan, if you're in management, if maybe Nick Foles is actually our guy, and maybe we need to look and see about doing something else with Carson Wentz. I know obviously you would say, no, Carson Wentz is the man because he's younger, he might be a little more athletic, and all that. But at the same time, we've seen the winning that can happen from Nick Foles, taking them to the Super Bowl last year after Carson Wentz went down. But also the season that they've had with Nick Foles taking over the helm once again as Carson Wentz goes down, and you start to kind of wonder about the frailness maybe of Carson Wentz, maybe being injured easily or often, and you have to take that into account. But I don't know if they can get it done here against the Saints. Saints didn't look great, and at the same time, we're resting their players. But that whole resting players a lot of times has not worked out great for teams in the past. We've seen it with the Colts in the past when Peyton Manning was there. Didn't always work out the way that they thought it probably should. But that one, I don't know if I can. It's more about the Drew Brees effect for me in that game. I think the Saints win that one. Probably a couple touchdown win, I would say. And that's the way I also look at the other one. I don't see the Cowboys being able to do enough to beat the Rams. The Rams, I think they've been maybe somewhat of the surprise of the season about how much they progressed, and we see that they are a win now mindset. Some of these teams, are in a rebuild or win down the road. They are in a win now, and we've seen that with them spending the money on the defensive line and really putting that emphasis there. I don't know that the Cowboys in this one may be able to keep up scoring-wise. And unfortunately, I see them going a little chalky on both sides, being Saints, Rams in the NFC Championship game. If you made me pick a upset on each side, it's probably the Eagles. And honestly, I'd have to go with the Chargers, even though I really want to go with the Colts. Being a Colts fan and an Andrew Luck fan in that, I see the Chargers maybe standing a better chance to beat the Patriots than the Colts do have the Chiefs. I just can't see them being able to put up those numbers with the Chiefs. But to me, it just seems a little chalky this weekend. The ones and twos advancing. If nothing else, I could see it Chiefs-Chargers, which would be one heck of a conference championship game, and probably we've seen already could be a really, really high-scoring game. It would be interesting to see how those teams would match up again this year. But those games are Saturday and Sunday, starting with the Colts-Chiefs, 4:35 Eastern on Saturday, ending that night at 8:15 approximately is the start at Eastern time with the Cowboys and the Rams. And then Sunday at 1:05 Eastern, the Chargers, Patriots. 4:40 Eastern is the Eagles and the Saints. So a lot of interesting games going on there in the NFL. And kind of as their season winds down, you hit this kind of mid-season role for the NBA and getting close to coming a little bit closer and closer to that All-Star game. We did learn in this last week that DeMarcus Cousins is expected to be back and playing probably somewhere around the 18th. I think the 18th was kind of the date that they were shooting for, January the 18th. It's a game they have against the Los Angeles Clippers. And to me, the interesting point there for the Warriors will be, how does he incorporate? The nice thing about Boogie fitting in there with the Warriors is that you don't have to change a lot of your offense for him. Yes, he can go back to the basket, and is really good at that, and that kind of old-time center basketball. But at the same time, he can step out. He can hit the threes. He's athletic. He's probably more athletic than what a lot of people realize. But with him getting back, how does that happen? There's a lot of stress on him. He's on a 1-year contract with the Warriors. How does he fit in? Can he fit in right? How does that affect his free agency status going forward? Is he able to gel in time to really make a show for other teams next year? Who knows, possibly the Lakers to join LeBron there. Maybe another run with Golden State. But it will be interesting. Now, the starting lineup will be pretty good. DeMarcus Cousins, Draymond Green, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and Klay Thompson being your starting five. All three have the ability to shoot the three. Don't have the numbers pulled up in front of me of who actually would have better numbers of DeMarcus Cousins or Draymond. To me, I would guard DeMarcus shooting a three before I'd guard Draymond, but that's just my personal opinion. But also this week we got the second returns for the All-Star game, which will be in Charlotte this year. And if you haven't voted, or if you still want to vote, don't worry. You still have time to vote on these. Voting doesn't end until January the 21st at 11:59 Eastern Time to get your vote in. According here to the @NBA All-Star Twitter page, you can vote on NBA.com, on the NBA app. You can search your favorite team or player. I imagine they'll probably have a link somewhere in there. But some of the not surprising things is that LeBron James leads. Giannis is in a close second. LeBron has 2.7 million votes. Giannis has 2.67 votes. 6.7 million votes, excuse me. And, then you have Kyrie with 2.38 million votes. As we were just talking about DeMarcus Cousins, it's interesting that he's still number 10 on the front court. He's a good ways behind, almost 200,000 votes behind Draymond Green. But to me, the interesting thing would be, would he have the ability to make up any and climb the ladder on these votes when he gets playing again? Is there enough time for him to showcase? Obviously, talking about the 18th possibly being his debut day, and he will start according to Steve Kerr. And, what's that look like? Obviously, you don't think an all-star vote would be coming for him this year, just due to the injury. But the thing that surprises me the most is that when you look at the guards part of the West, is that Derrick Rose is ahead of James Harden and Russell Westbrook. Two probably the higher names in the NBA right now. But you have Derrick Rose, who is a former MVP in himself, almost even doubling his lead that he had on them before. Harden being the reigning MVP, Russ is a triple-double machine, and Steph Curry leads all the guards there in the West. But if you look at these early returns, Klay Thompson's 5th in the guards, and obviously that has some to do with the Derrick Rose situation here, coming in as number 2 on the guards. And, what an incredible season he's had, even though he's been out the past few games, scheduled to return shortly, I believe, maybe even this weekend, maybe even be back the day this podcast comes out on that Friday, may even come back there after his ankle injury. But what a story, and I know we talked about this last time. What a story that is of Derrick Rose being injured and kind of bouncing around, and seems to have maybe found a home there in Minnesota. I saw a video of him talking with a young man, and it was just being able to realize what he's been through and kind of how to help this young man to adjust to his situation and to keep going. But the other thing that I do want to note off this second returns is that the most notable change probably in this is that Paul George is now third here on the Western Conference front court. Now, obviously, we do East and West, but they will be drafted. I believe they're drafting again for the All-Star game, which I didn't mind too much. I get having the East and West divided out to be able to get kind of equal participants from each side. But Paul George here in this second return, and I think it'll be a little more interesting next week to see as we get a little closer. We'll get a better idea of what these rosters are going to look like. But Paul George now jumps ahead of people like Kevin Durant, like Anthony Davis, and he picked up almost 1.28 million votes in a week's time. And he's pretty good ways ahead of Kevin Durant. Has almost a million and 1.75 almost million votes ahead of Kevin Durant. And so that's the interesting thing to me, is for someone like Paul George, whose name is known in the NBA, to make that kind of a jump within a week's time is, I think, a testament to how he's been playing this year, having almost a career banner year, even outside of his time in Indianapolis. But a lot is going on now. NCAA basketball is into conference season, and teams will start seeing each other for the second time. We'll start to see maybe who the real teams are, who the title contenders actually could be, and who maybe we thought a little bit more of in the beginning of the year than we do now. But we'll get into that a little bit more with Aaron and his thoughts on it. But as always, you can hit me up on Twitter at @dish_RD Sports. Don't forget, you can hit me up on the new text machine. Give me your thoughts. Let me know what you think with the discussion that Aaron and I have on the text machine. It's 646-547-9894. You can hit me up the text machine. You can feel free to email. It's rdsportsreport@gmail.com. As always, just please go like, subscribe, unsubscribe, subscribe, unsubscribe, all that back and forth. That actually does help to do that a few times. But go subscribe and leave us a review, please. 5 stars, just nice karma there. Even if you don't enjoy it, just give the 5 stars, and karma will return it to you. But with all that being said, we're going to now get into my discussion of college basketball, a little bit of NFL, and a lot of talk with Aaron Torres, which you can find on Twitter at Aaron_Torres. And hope you enjoy it. Don't forget to go subscribe and leave a review. Hit me up on the text machine at 646-547-9894, completely anonymous, and enjoy my discussion here with Aaron Torres. All right, if you will, please help me welcome on my guest at this time. He is the host of on Fox Sports Radio. You can hear him Saturday morning at 11 Eastern Time. He also hosts his own podcast, the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, writer for The Athletic and KSR, and a author of One and Fun. So first off, please welcome my guest, Aaron Torres. And Aaron, do you have time to breathe or anything like that?
Do I have time to breathe? Is that what you said?
Yeah, with all the stuff that you have going on, do you actually have any time to think to yourself?
It's busy, especially this time of year. You know, like when you host a national radio show. I mean, you know me because you follow me on Twitter, and I'm sure a lot of people listening do too. Like, I love college hoops, and I certainly love everything I cover. But this time of year, when the NFL kind of overlaps with the NBA and college football is obviously done, but, you got to keep your finger on everything. So it gets to be a lot. But at the end of the day, it's so cliche, but I really do enjoy what I do. I love my Saturday show with Arnie Spanier, where we pretty much talk mostly NFL, a little college football, and then I love kind of having my own thing, my podcast, where I can either interview people that I find interesting or people in the basketball world or the football world or whatever. So it's a lot of work. It's exhausting this time of year trying to keep up with everything. But at the same time, like I said, I love what I do, so I can't complain. And let's be honest, even if I did complain, nobody would want to hear it anyway. So why bother? You know what I mean?
I completely understand that. It's it seems to be a fun life to live, even being a busy one. It seems like something a lot of people would enjoy to be able to do. So.
Yep, and that's the other thing too, man, is I'm very grateful for the opportunities that have come to me through the years. And that's really the big thing, right? Is like I'm lucky to get to do what I do, and I know that there's a lot of people that would trade positions with me. And so yeah, man. So even my bad days are all relative. I'm not fighting fires. I'm not on the front lines with the military or anything like that. I get to talk about sports and argue and debate Tua versus Kyler Murray and Calipari versus Coach K. Like, life really isn't that tough when you put it in that perspective.
Yeah, when you do put it that way, yeah, it's not too bad to be able to sit here, even as you and I are doing, and just to be able to talk sports. But first off, I know you mentioned you were watching that UCLA game. And what are your thoughts, after Steve Alford's left, but also going forward for that UCLA? You being based there in LA, I'm sure you hear a lot going on there too.
Yeah, I still know a lot of the guys on the staff. It's an unfortunate byproduct, right? And like, this is sports. This is big boy sports and college basketball. We pay these coaches a lot of money, and we expect them to win. And so you and I are recording kind of during this UCLA-Oregon game. We obviously, I think even by the time we finish recording, we won't know the result, but UCLA has gone 2-0 since Steve Alford was fired. And, to be perfectly honest, maybe it's different because I live in LA and I'm in the belly of the beast. I know a lot of the guys on the staff. But I was kind of surprised of the national reaction to it. To me, it seemed pretty cut and dried. You come into the year on the hot seat, you lose by basically double digits to every Power 5 team that you play, with the exception of Notre Dame, of course. And then you lose to Belmont, and then you lose to Liberty, both at home, both in front of empty arenas. And to me, it seemed pretty self-explanatory. Like, I was texting with people other Pac-12 coaches, other coaches here on the West Coast, and everybody seemed to kind of be in agreement. Like when you lose to Liberty at home and you're already on the hot seat and you have a bunch of bad losses already, you're not making it through the weekend. And so I was kind of surprised by the national reaction of some people that said, how can you fire him mid-season? What point does it prove? Well, I don't really see what the point of keeping a guy around is when you lose, again, for the third time to Liberty at home. And so I think it was best for everybody to move on. I think you could legitimately argue that UCLA has one of the 10 best rosters in college basketball. They have, behind Kentucky and Duke, actually recruited better than anybody in college basketball. They had, I think, about the number 5 or 6 recruiting class last year, the number 3 recruiting class the year before, and then the year before that was the year they signed, obviously, TJ Leaf and Lonzo Ball. And so I say all this to say the talent is there. They should be, they could be, I think, a top 10 to 15 team in the country, but it just wasn't clicking under Steve Alford. And so I think the school made the right decision. I think they made it at the right time. And now it's just going to be fascinating to see kind of who ends up next there.
All right, so you mentioned there of who ends up next. A lot of names for that job specifically have been thrown out. I saw something the other day where a couple high-powered boosters, big money boosters, were wanting Rick Pitino. Any truth to that you've heard? Or?
Yeah, I kind of actually think it's the opposite. And first of all, I think like there's a general misunderstanding of, I don't think anybody can really hire Rick Pitino until we figure out exactly what's going on with this Brian Bowen situation, until the NCAA does its investigation. What did he know? What did he not know? I mean, I guess in theory you could hire him, but you also have to be willing to fire him if something comes out in the Brian Bowen investigation. But I also, the thing with UCLA is that I really think that UCLA has kind of a warped perception of where they kind of fit into in the college basketball hierarchy. I think you ask a UCLA fan, they think that they are on the level of Kentucky, Duke, North Carolina, even though really nothing in the last about 40 years reflects that. But I bring that up, Dishmond, to say, I think that in this case, it kind of is going to work to their advantage. I don't think UCLA, I saw the report that they're boosters like Rick Pitino. I don't buy it. And I actually think it's the exact opposite. I think this is one of those cases, like I said, where their warped sense of self-worth is going to be in favor of them. I think that they look at the situation saying, we can get a good coach without having to scrape the bottom of the barrel for a guy who is morally bankrupt, for lack of a better term. And so I never bought that rumor, knowing kind of the power brokers at UCLA, kind of how they hold themselves and what regard they hold themselves. And I don't see it. I think it was Adam Zagoria who reported. I like Zags a lot. I think he's really good at what he does. But every source that I have, I just don't see it happening.
It's one of those things where, to me, I look at it and I go, well, I could see where that relationship would work out. But I'm with you. How do you hire him without knowing the end result of his time there at Louisville and the whole Brian Bowen situation and all that? And it may be the case that he's enjoying his time over in Greece, at the same time. So maybe that's where he wants to turn himself. But what's your opinion or your thoughts, what you've heard of who would be the top candidate and maybe the dark horse within that UCLA job?
Yeah, I think there's a couple guys that just frankly aren't realistic. I think, the Grand Slam home run is Billy Donovan, but Billy Donovan makes a lot of money to coach the Thunder. So one, you'd have to pay him money comparable to or greater than what he's already making. But two, the bigger thing is the Thunder are actually pretty good this year. And so he will definitely be coaching till the end of April to the first round of the playoffs. And realistically, he could be into the middle of May. And maybe there's a contemporary example that I can't think of, but I don't ever remember an NBA coach who is having success, who is in the playoffs, leaving his team in the middle of a stretch run. And basically, UCLA would be taking this massive gamble. This is even if Billy Donovan wanted the job, and I'm not sold that he does. So I don't think he's a candidate. I had heard from the beginning that Fred Hoiberg was hoping to stay in the NBA, and the buzz was when Tom Thibodeau was let go with the Minnesota Timberwolves that there may be a role there for Fred Hoiberg. And so I think it leads me, one, to the guy that I think should be the top candidate, and that's Eric Musselman at Nevada. And, look, I did 40 minutes of this on my podcast, and so I don't want to take up too much of your time, Dishmond, like with everything that I said there. Like, most people can just go listen to what I said. But the reason I like Muss is a few things. Is one, UCLA is a weird job. Like, I know you're a Kentucky fan. I know there's a lot of Kentucky fans listening. UCLA isn't Kentucky or Indiana or North Carolina in the sense that you can't just roll the ball out and expect people to show up. Like, say what you want about Kentucky, and it's funny because I told Steve Alford this, is like, Kentucky, even when Billy Gillispie was terrible at Kentucky, there were still 20,000 people Rupp Arena every night booing them. And so with UCLA, you have to win one, you have to play an entertaining style of play too, and you kind of got to be your own PR firm. And this was something that I always think that I don't think that Steve Alford ever really accepted about the job. Like, Steve Alford is very much, he's a gym rat, Indiana high school legend. We all know it. Like, I think Steve Alford thinks that a coach's job is to have his team prepared between the white lines every time that they step out on the court. Now, you could argue whether they were actually prepared when they played for him, but that's kind of another story. And with Alford, like, he just never wanted to do the extra stuff. I mean, it was a not so subtle secret in college basketball that, like, Steve Alford didn't really like to recruit. And, it was a lot of what the recruiting came down to was on his assistant coaches. Steve Alford is not obviously a self-promotional man. If he never had to do a single thing of media, he wouldn't want to. And so that's where I think Muss fits in, because with Musselman, he's a natural showman, a natural promoter. His dad was a coach in the minor leagues, the ABA. He was a coach in the minor leagues. He understands the value of showmanship. And if you follow Nevada on social media, they're great with social media. They promote the hell out of their program. And I think that's the kind of guy that you need at UCLA, in addition to the fact that he's won big at Nevada. And I think he'll bring an attitude of toughness to the program too. I've sat in on UCLA practices. I've sat in on Nevada practices. And I was joking with somebody the other day, if you put the UCLA guys through one of Muss's practices, half of them would quit halfway through the first practice. I mean, they're intense. They're, kind of survival of the fittest. And that team, Nevada, plays like that. They play without fear because they've been pushed to the limit in practice. And so I think when you combine the fact that I think Muss has a little showmanship to him, the fact that Muss understands that if I come to LA, I'm not competing, just with USC for entertainment value. I'm competing with LeBron. I'm competing with the Dodgers. I'm competing with Sean McVay. I think he's the guy. I don't know if UCLA is really interested in him. There's some things from his past that I think are concerning people at UCLA. I think it's totally overrated, and that's the guy that I would go get if I was UCLA. And I'll be perfectly honest, if it's not Muss, if it's not Hoiberg, I really have no idea what direction they're leaning. I think it could be 10 or 12 different guys, from Jamie Dixon to, fill in the blank with whoever else you kind of want.
To me, that will be the interesting thing to see where they go and how big of a splash they try to make. Because I'm with you, they, I think, perceive themselves to be on the level of Duke, Kentucky, Kansas. But in my lifetime, it hasn't been anything close. Yep. Yes, I know the history of Wooden being there and all that. And even Denny Crum, being with Wooden and stuff for years. I still have never known UCLA to be a power in my lifetime. But
what I would say really quick, though, I don't mean to cut you off, but I do think this is an important point. I also think that even though I agree 100%, by the way, with what you said, I also was surprised that there was this narrative when the job opened up from national media. And I actually really only thought Sam Vecini from The Athletic covered it really well because he lives here in L.A. Jeff Borzello did a really good piece for ESPN. My podcast was awesome, but let's be honest, it's always awesome. And I thought everybody else just totally missed the boat. And people were talking about the UCLA job like it's Mississippi State. Like, I totally agree that UCLA's self-perception is not accurate. It's not Duke. It's not Kentucky. It's not Kansas. It's not North Carolina. But there's no reason that it can't be the best. Let's just start with the bottom line that it is by far the best job on the West Coast. You could argue that maybe Arizona is better because they have better fan support. But, I mean, UCLA, I'm not kidding, Dishmond, when I say there's probably 50 D1 prospects all within driving distance in L.A., usually 2 to 3 McDonald's All-Americans. And I'm not even talking about the really good players. I mean, Russell Westbrook, I had Ben Howland on my podcast. Russell Westbrook only came to UCLA after they had a kid go pro that they weren't expecting. Kawhi Leonard went to San Diego State. He's from Riverside. That's 35 minutes away from UCLA's campus. James Harden was never, I don't think, ever really considered UCLA. He's an NBA MVP. So, like, the point I'm trying to make is, like, let's just take out the fact that there's McDonald's All-Americans. There's also those gritty, grimy, tough guys that you need to win in college basketball. There is every kind of player that you can need within a 45-minute to an hour drive of UCLA's campus. They just opened a brand new practice facility. They do have the history. They can pay well if they choose to. I don't know if they're going to. And so I do think that's an important point is, like, everyone, like, I've heard so many people, and I think you're right. It's not Duke, it's not Kansas, it's not Kentucky. But, like, I hear people talking about it like it's, like I said, Mississippi State, Washington State, Purdue. It's not. It's a really good job, but there are a lot of variables that come into play that do make it tougher. But I just think if they get the right guy and they get it rolling, all of a sudden it's kind of like Calipari at Kentucky, right? And, like, I know I'm rambling at this point, but just hear me out. Like, remember when Billy Gillispie got fired and everybody said, oh, Kentucky will never be Kentucky again. They can't. It's not like it was 40 years ago with Adolph Rupp. It's not like it was 20 years ago with Rick Pitino. And then Calipari gets there, and overnight, snap of a finger, everyone's like, oh, whoa. And then all of a sudden you're sitting there like, why can't everyone do this at Kentucky? I think it could be the exact same thing at UCLA. You get the right guy. I think it's just going to be a light bulb flip for all of college basketball. Like, why did it take so long for them to get this thing going? But again, it does become a question of can they find that right guy and who that right guy is.
Well, and I think you said it perfectly right there. It's all about the right guy, that perfect fit. Calipari and Kentucky, they go together well.
Okay.
His desire to win, the fans' desire to win, it all goes together perfectly. Kentucky and Billy Gillispie didn't go well together. Real
quick, and I don't mean to jump in, but I hate to keep cutting you off, but when Calipari got hired at Kentucky, it was right before really my writing career took off. But I remember saying at the time, if Kentucky is serious about playing with the big boys, they got to go get John Calipari. I mean, this was a guy that had made 4 straight Sweet 16s, 3 Elite Eights, was within a national championship, starting to recruit really well, as you know, had DeMarcus Cousins, John Wall, Xavier Henry, all basically committed to Memphis. I said, you have to go get John Calipari. I have never felt that urge again to say there is only one guy who is perfect for that job until right now. And I really do feel like Musselman is the perfect guy for that job. Will they pursue him? I don't know. But I just think that charismatic personality, the ability to sell the program, the ability to get the most out of your players, to me, that is why he is the guy. And I hate to keep cutting you off, but you keep bringing up points that I'm thinking of here as we go.
Oh, you're good. Go ahead. You just go on and whatever strikes you. So, but to me, I look at UCLA, and we'll get off of UCLA here in a minute, but I look at them almost down to me in that next tier with like the U of L's, and with Chris Mack being able to build up U of L already like he has. To me, they've been somewhat impressive until really last night with the Pittsburgh loss, but they've been better than I thought they would be this year, and I think continually you'll see that it looks to be a good fit between Chris Mack and U of L, and I think that's what UCLA is with Muss could be. could be on that same level. And as you talked, that area being such a hotbed with talent, it's an easier place to kind of recruit. But my only thought with that is there's so much going on in UCLA. Is that maybe someone's thought is I could be on the back burner, or is it the kind of thing that you have to create that desire in the fans to come there, kind of like Steve Alford wasn't really able to do, obviously, as we've seen the empty arenas over and over?
Yeah, no, and that's a huge part of it. You have to be a salesman. But I also so you have to be a salesman. And the bottom line is with LA, and I said this on my podcast, and again, I did a half an hour on this. So if people are into what I'm saying, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, late last week, I talked about this for 40 minutes. But the bottom line is with the University of Kentucky or Kansas, there is no competition. With UCLA, you're competing for entertainment value. You're competing with LeBron. You're competing with Sean McVay. You're competing with Phillip Rivers. That's just for entertainment value. Now you add in the fact, couple things. The campus is really hard to get to. It's a real big pain in the ass to get to Westwood for a 7 o'clock tip-off on a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night. And so to get people over there, people say LA is a bad sports town. It's not a bad sports town. What LA is a town that isn't going to pay to see a loser, because and that sounds really crass and like rude and bad, but here's the bottom line with LA. It's too hard to get everywhere. It's too time consuming. It's too expensive. I mean, they're literally in the middle of rush hour. For me to go 10 miles, Dishmond, it could take me an hour. For me to get to UCLA, which is probably about 20 miles from where I live, if I don't hit the right back roads at the right time, it'll take me an hour and a half to get there. And so for people here, there has to be a reason to show up. You can't just win, you got to put on a show. And so one, you're entertaining, you're competing for entertainment value with LeBron and all the things I said, Sean McVay, whatever. Two, people don't want to sit in traffic to see a loser. And three, you're also just competing with the fact that it's LA. And I said this on my podcast. You know who you're competing with in LA that you're not competing with in Lexington or Lawrence? You're competing with Taco Tuesday. Because for $10, I can go down to Cabo Cantina, crush some tacos, crush some margaritas, and sit outside and it's 70 degrees. So you tell me, Dishmond, I'm gonna go pay $30 to go watch UCLA get their ass kicked by Liberty, or I'm going to go sit outside on the patio in 70 degrees, get a little suntan, and drink some margaritas and tacos. You tell me, which one would you rather do? Which one would you rather do?
For me, I'd go get the tacos.
That's what I'm saying. And that doesn't even take into account that LeBron is in town that night, that there's a Rams playoff game this weekend, that there's all these other things going on. But I would also say the flip side to this, Dishmond, too, which is really important. I was at all those games that Lonzo Ball played in, and there was about a 10-game stretch the second half of UCLA season where it was the hottest ticket in town, where people put aside Margarita Tuesday or Taco Tuesday. They put aside the Lakers, who weren't playing well at the time. The Rams weren't playing well at the time, and they were there. You couldn't get a ticket to those Lonzo Ball games. And so the point I bring up is that, yes, it's really hard to get people to committed to what you're doing, but if you put on a show, people will come. And it was amazing to see that one season. Like I said a minute ago, it was a flip of a switch. All of a sudden it went from nobody knows who Lonzo Ball is to you can't get a ticket to you go to the arena and Chris Carter is sitting front row, from Fox Sports FS1, Dave Winfield, B+ celebrities are sitting there like it can be done. I've seen it done in the last 3 years. So that was the thing that bothered me, is this idea that, like I've said a few times, that UCLA is this terrible job. It's not a terrible job, but it is a unique job, and it's not just a place you can win, but you got to win with style. But if you do that, people will come.
And when you kept saying that, all I could think of was Field of Dreams. If you win, they will come. And
bingo.
That's for a lot of places, but at the same time, this is not Starkville, Mississippi. This is LA. If you win enough, and we've seen that even I personally with the Rams and even the Chargers moving back to LA, when they've started winning, you've seen the crowd start to show up as well. I know those first few they struggled a little bit, but
bingo. And I was going to say, the Dodgers have led the Major League Baseball in attendance like 8 straight years, and they've been good every year, and people come out. So that's the only point I'm trying to make. I think LA gets a bum rap as a sports town. People will come, but they're not going to come see a loser. And it sounds crass, but that's just the reality of where we are, what LA is and all that.
Well, and LA is that. I think it's on a bigger level there. Even you look at even a lot of the college teams, and even in college cities, everybody's struggling with being able to sell those tickets because of being able to go, on a Taco Tuesday and watch a game or something. You have to create that desire, and I could only imagine that desire would have to be even higher there in LA, where there's so much more to do.
Yep.
But I want to get to kind of entering, and we've already entered for a lot of these teams, the conference play in the basketball season. Up to this point, to you, what's the team that's kind of surprised you the most with their performance, and maybe the team that's you've kind of been disappointed up to this point with?
So I'll say this, is that a couple things. There are a lot of teams that have been like pleasantly surprising. And it's all the obvious ones. It's Texas Tech. I love Chris Beard. Anybody that follows me on Twitter. Tennessee, as good as I thought they would be. I think they're even better. You go on and on down the list. NC State has been phenomenal. I'll throw a curveball at you, and I don't know if this is going to hold up well. I was blown away on Wednesday night by Ole Miss, who beat Auburn at home. And so for people who don't know, I think everybody listening, I know you're a UK guy, assuming a lot of the people listening are fans of SEC basketball. But Ole Miss finished in last place in the SEC last year. They went 12-20. Now, part of it was they fell apart at the end. The coach got fired with like 10 games left, and the team basically stopped trying. But I bring it up because Ole Miss just beat Auburn on Wednesday night at home, and they are now 12-2. So it is January 9th, 10th, I think, when we're recording, but it was January 9th that they matched their win total from last year. And so I just think what Kermit Davis has done, I was doubtful up until that Auburn game, but what Kermit Davis has done in year one, it's just mind-boggling to me. This is a team that, it's not a team that brought in a super high-profile coach. It's not a team that brought in some crazy John Wall, DeMarcus Cousins, Eric Bledsoe recruiting class. It's just a group of dudes. And it's the same group of dudes with like a couple top 200 type prospects that it's not like they signed like some crazy All-American class. So like, I don't know if Ole Miss can hold up for the long run, but I think it's an incredible story that they've already matched their win total, that Kermit Davis just looks like a grand slam, and that they're doing great things in the SEC. And I do think that it adds another variable to the depth in the SEC. Once again, it looks like between Alabama beating Kentucky, between South Carolina beating Mississippi State, between Ole Miss beating Auburn, it once again looks like this league is deep. That's the team that I've been most impressed by. I would say probably the team I've been most disappointed by is UCLA, but we've literally spent 25 minutes talking about them, so we probably don't have to dig too deep on that one.
Yeah, we probably don't have to go much more on that UCLA, but with the depth there, as you mentioned, in the SEC, is it something that they just got caught off guard for Auburn, or is Auburn maybe not living up to being one of the top ones in the SEC, or just maybe just an off night for them, do you think?
Yeah, I think it can be a little bit of A and a little bit of B. I don't think Auburn's the same team as last year, and it was funny because I picked them in the preseason to go to the Final Four. And I felt good about that, and I still felt good about it really until last night. But it's very clear to me that something's off with that team. And it's funny because the only real loss that they had was Mustafa Heron, who went from Auburn to St. John's. And I actually thought it was going to be addition by subtraction. He was a little bit of a ball stopper, a guy that tried to do too much. I don't want to say wasn't a team player, but, had his moments where you're like, dude, what are you doing? And I thought it would be addition by subtraction. And so what's been interesting for me to see is that I don't know what's wrong with them, but there is something wrong. And maybe it is not having Mustafa Heron. In hindsight, I think about it, and I do wonder if him just taking people off the dribble kind of did help create spacing in terms of other guys being open around the three-point line. They also have a kid, Austin Wiley, who was suspended last year as part of the FBI probe. He came back, and he's a really good player. Like, he'll probably be a second-round NBA draft pick, but he's kind of like that traditional low post, back to the basket, run down court, plant your butt in the post kind of guy. And like in 2019, I guess, I don't really know how well that works, but especially with that Auburn team. I mean, the thing about Auburn last year was they played small, but they played so fast, and they were just so good and balanced. And I do think he slows them down a little bit. And so I think it's a fascinating subplot is like, what is the ceiling for this Auburn team? Because like I said, I thought they were going to the Final Four, and now we're sitting here, 2 months into the season, and for whatever reason, I just don't think they're the same team.
So when you're talking about Auburn, you're talking about your Final Four. I noticed it's been a while back. You had in your Final Four Nevada, Kentucky, Gonzaga, and then Auburn. Was that it? Was that your Final Four?
Yes, sir. You got that correct. I had that pinned on my Twitter. I'm going to put it back up there one of these days. I just took it down I forget why, but I took it down the other day.
Okay. I was going to say, I thought I'd seen it either there or a while back. So how confident are you still in those, out of those four, that they would get there? And if you had to maybe remove one, maybe it's the Auburn, who would you, at this point in the season, put into that spot?
Yeah, I mean, I feel all right about it. I think Gonzaga is actually the second best team in the country right now. I actually think Tennessee is the best team in the country right now. And it's subject to change, and things happen, and, attitudes change, and guys get mad about stuff, and stuff's always going to change. But I really like Tennessee. I really like Gonzaga. Gonzaga just got two guys back from injuries, and I don't know how it's going to affect like their rotations and all that stuff. So I like Gonzaga, but I could see them either taking off and being like, wow, they're really good, or wow, they can't figure out how to use all these guys. I still do like Kentucky. And maybe I'm just totally naive. I still think they can beat anybody in college basketball. I think they could beat Duke. I think they got Duke's best game of the season. But they got to, at some point, got to put a couple good games together. And they did against North Carolina and Louisville. And John Calipari even said afterward, after these last two games against Alabama and Texas A&M, that they reverted back to some old habits. And so, if they can channel that North Carolina energy for every game, I think they're one of the top 5-10 teams in the country. But I just don't know that they can do that. And I do think we're going to find out pretty quick if they can, because they have a pretty manageable schedule here these next couple games. They got Vanderbilt at home Saturday and then Georgia early next week. But then they go to Auburn. They get Mississippi State at some point. The schedule really picks up after these next two games. And so I do like Kentucky, but I need to see that consistency from them. I still like Nevada. I don't like Auburn. I could see it happening, but I don't like them. Without knowing what the bracket is, if I could take one out, it would definitely be Auburn. If I could put one in, it would actually be Tennessee. And if you're telling me, is that my Final Four, the three I had, Kentucky, Gonzaga, Kentucky, Gonzaga, Nevada, plus Tennessee, I feel pretty good about all those picks. But obviously there are other teams, Duke, Michigan, Virginia is actually pretty good this year. So I think there's probably about 8 to 10 teams that are probably a cut above everybody else. And I think I have 3 of them in my Final Four right now, or I have 2 of them at least in Gonzaga and Nevada. I think Kentucky can get there. So I don't feel terrible about that Final Four, but like I said with Kentucky, like they can get there if Kentucky wants to get there. And what I always revert back to with Kentucky is people are like, oh, you work for KSR, you're such a Kentucky homer. It's like, no, I mean, look, if you look around college basketball, I'm pretty sure Jeff Goodman had Kentucky winning the national championship. I'm pretty sure Jeff Borzello had Kentucky winning the national championship. There's a reason that everybody had Kentucky winning the national championship. It's not because we're all homers. It's because we actually, it's because people like actually really like their guys. And so I still think they can get there, but I just need to see it kind of more more consistently.
Well, and I think for people like you, people like Jeff Goodman talking about Kentucky being there, it seemed like that recipe was there. The grad transfer and Reed Travis, P.J. Washington coming back for a second year, Nick Richards, Quade Green. You had other pieces coming in along with some talent, and it seemed like it was either Duke on some people, but it was just because of all the freshmen that they have. But I think what we've seen so far in this college basketball season is Duke played a really good game the first game of the year. Kentucky played a really poor one. Both of them kind of settled. Kentucky obviously playing better now, but Duke it doesn't seem to be getting as much hype as they did at the beginning of the season. If you were just predicting and looking into the Aaron Torres crystal ball, without seeing a bracket, obviously, it makes it difficult. But how far would you see this Duke team maybe going? Because it could be Final Four, but you never know. It could be second round. But if you were looking at it, Aaron, what would you think? Maybe it's the floor for this team to go in Duke.
Well, I think any team this year, I don't think anybody would be totally surprised if any team were to lose on the first weekend. It's just the nature of the tournament. I mean, there is no 2014, 2015 Kentucky team. I mean, there really isn't. I mean, even Duke, like you said, and like I said, Duke played their best game of the season against Kentucky. I mean, they finished 12 of 28 from three, which is, almost 50%. It's like 46%. And then if you look at them since then, they haven't been the same team. Like they, as a team, statistically, they're shooting 32% from three, so they basically were aberrational there. RJ Barrett, my buddy Rob Dowster from NBC Sports put out a really interesting article the other day where he did the splits with RJ Barrett of Power 5 teams versus non-Power 5 teams. Like, we look at RJ Barrett, and he's averaging 23 a game, but if you look at him against Power 5 teams, his numbers aren't actually that good. So I just think it's really interesting. I don't think they're as good as I think a lot of people think they are. I think Zion is so spectacular that we get mesmerized by, one, how good he is, two, how fun he is to watch. And two, I will say, to Duke's credit, they're playing really good defense. But I also think that there are holes, there are problems. And so, without knowing a bracket, I think they're probably one of the four best teams in college basketball right now at this exact moment. And so without knowing what the bracket is, I would probably say I would have them on either in the Final Four or the fringe of the Final Four because they're as good as anybody. But I also think there's a lot of teams and a lot of styles that could trip them up if they catch the wrong team on the wrong night. Like I said, I think that, most of America tuned in for that Duke-Kentucky game. They saw the best version of Duke. They probably didn't tune in for the Texas Tech game where Duke really didn't play well for the first 35 minutes of the game. They, a lot of people probably missed the Gonzaga game that they lost. And I just think there's a lot to figure out with Duke. I mean, just as another example, I talked about 3-point shooting. I talked about all that stuff. They just played their first true road game of the season on Tuesday of this week. They hadn't played a road game until right now. So as we record here on Thursday, they play at Florida State on Saturday. That's a game I could see them losing. So I just think there's a lot of question marks with Duke. Do I think they're one of the four best teams in the country right now? Yes. But do I think there's really any gap between them and, say, Michigan or Tennessee or Gonzaga? No. And I just think they're different teams that have different strengths and different weaknesses, but I don't think Duke is, definitively better than any of those teams that I mentioned.
And to me, I also kind of look at a team and judge them maybe after they've seen, when Duke and North Carolina, they'll play two times in the year. and how does North Carolina fare the second time? How does Roy Williams change it up? Any other teams that they might play that second time, what changes for that other team, and how do they play Duke differently? I think says a lot, not only about maybe how good Duke is, but ways obviously to be able to beat them in the long run, and probably giving advice to coaches there in the NCAA. But last thing, Aaron, right before we finish up here, you were talking about a lot of times you talk NFL on Saturdays on Fox Sports Radio there. So looking at the divisional round, you have what seems to be the Saints, and I'm sure you saw what Sean Payton did the other day.
Of course.
And to me, I'm going, okay, I'll just take the money that you pulled out to sit on with the Lombardi Trophy there. So that would be enough to motivate me.
Sure.
To be able to see the actual physical bonus that you would have in front of you. But if you were picking out of the games that are this weekend, so Chiefs, Colts, Patriots, Chargers, Saints, Eagles, Cowboys, Rams, maybe one of those, the underseeds or somebody that's not getting a lot of buzz, who do you think would be most equipped or might be able to get to even the championship game, the conference championship game at that?
Yeah, it's interesting because my picks are a little bit different. Like, it seems like a lot of people are trending towards the Chargers. I actually like the Patriots to win and cover. So the Patriots are obviously the favorite. I like the Chiefs big against the Colts. Sorry, I know you're based out of Indianapolis or the Indiana area there.
You're good.
Go ahead. What were you saying?
I was laughing the other day. I saw the stat that I'm sure you've seen, that Chiefs are 0-4 all time against the Colts, and I thought, well, that's different times in the playoffs, and the way that Chiefs team plays this year. I picked them to beat the Texans, but I don't know that I can go with it this week's against the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. But just continue on there. Didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Yeah. It's cool, man. No, I mean, I just think that the Chiefs, and this is something we talked about on my radio show last week because we came on right after the Colts-Texans game, is, to beat the Chiefs, like, you can beat them, and the Chiefs' defense isn't good, but you're going to have to score 30 points to beat them. And I don't know that the Colts can go score for score with them. I mean, even the games that the Chiefs lost this year, 42-41 to the Patriots. 52 to whatever, 54 to 51 to the Rams. Even that loss to the Chargers the other day, 29-28. Seahawks, they lost on that Sunday night. They scored. Like, you got to score 35 points to beat them, and I just don't think the Chiefs or the Colts are the team to do that. So, if you're asking me to pick an upset, like, I don't feel good about this, but I mean, I guess it would probably be the Eagles just because of Nick Foles. I don't think the Saints have been playing particularly well the last month of the season. They, they lost that last game of the year when they were resting their starters. They played Carolina on a Monday night and looked really bad. They won like 12-9. They obviously lost to the Cowboys. Like, I think the Saints are going to win, but like, if you're asking me to pick an upset, like, that one feels like the most logical because the Saints haven't been playing really well. One of the last really good games they played, they kicked the crap out of the Eagles. It was like 45-7, and that was obviously when Carson Wentz was at quarterback. And then, of course, just the Nick Foles factor. So, I mean, if you're asking me to pick one, that's probably the one that I would pick.
So, if your upset does happen there, the Eagles over the Saints, do you think Philadelphia will lose their collective minds again with that Nick Foles effect?
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, and I think, like, it's, I don't know enough about NFL contracts, and like, we have insiders and analysts and people to handle that kind of nuance. But
right.
Like, yeah, I think it's like a really tough conversation, like, especially if the Eagles win this week, because like I said, the Eagles battling for a playoff berth went to the Superdome with Carson Wentz and lost like 48-7 or something like that. I forget what it was, but Sean Payton was throwing the ball up by like 35 points in the fourth quarter. Like, they were embarrassed with Carson Wentz. So, like, if they go back a month and a half later, 2 months later, and they win that game with Carson Wentz on the sideline and Nick Foles, like, I do think that conversation has to be had. So I think people are already going crazy in Philadelphia after last week with the kick against the Bears. But I would also add that, like, I really do think if this weekend, if the Eagles do win, and again, I don't know all the nuances of the contracts off the top of my head. I'm more of a college basketball guy. But I do think, like, you got to get to that point where, like, at what point do you start really thinking, like, is Carson Wentz tradable? Do we have to go with Nick Foles long term?
Yeah, that was something I was thinking about. I thought, man, if Nick Foles keeps winning, what do you do with him? And I'm certainly no expert at the contracts, but to me, it would have to be something enjoyable to be out there in LA when it's football time, especially I would think on Sundays during the season. Do you just wake up and just be able to sit around all day and watch football if you wish?
Yeah, I do my Saturday show, and I'm really watching college football all day during the college football season. Then we do our Saturday show, preview the NFL. So Sunday's my only, like, day to sleep in, and so I basically just sleep in, wake up as I please, and, put on a pot of coffee, or maybe not a pot, but a cup of coffee or whatever, and start watching the games. Just flip on Red Zone like everybody else, man. It's one of the benefits of living in LA is football starts early, it ends early. But yeah, man, I'm just trying to consume as much as I can. So when I'm doing my shows or, coming on with guys like you, I at least sound like I know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I completely understand that. And to me, that would be one of the biggest benefits being out there in LA is it ends early enough. So if you still want to do something in the evening, you have the time to. But
before Saturdays, before I was doing radio at night, it was really nice. But yeah, no, it is what it is. But yeah, it's funny because usually, we'll start recording my podcast on Sunday night around 7 Pacific, and by the time we wrap up, it's usually the game's starting to end because it's about 11. 7 Pacific is 10 Eastern. We wrap up around 11 Eastern. The next thing you know, so.
Well, Aaron, I appreciate you coming on. Want to get you off here. Don't want to take up any more of your time, but I appreciate you coming on here and talking a little college football, UCLA. As Aaron said earlier, if you want to hear his whole UCLA take, you can find that on the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I did listen to it myself, Aaron. Pretty interesting take there. To me, if I were going, I'd go the Earl Watson if they can't get Muss. But you can also find Aaron on Twitter at Aaron_Torres. You can go buy his book, One in Fun. Once again, Aaron, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you after a while.
All right. Thank you for the time, man. I appreciate it.